Hi students, welcome back to our English class. In the previous class, we went through the story The Best Investment I Ever Made by A.J. Cronin. Now we move to the text in detail. Cronin himself is the narrator of the story. He was traveling in a ship from New York. On the second day, as he was walking around on the deck, he noticed that a passenger was observing him. He did not want to answer questions from strangers, and so he pretended that he did not notice him. The man continued to observe him. He felt he was not confident enough to come to him and ask for clarifications. He was in his early 40s. He was fair in complexion and short. He had clear blue eyes. He had thin hair and a large forehead. He wore a dark suit and sober tie and rimless spectacles. All these gave him a look of seriousness and reservation. It was time for dinner and he went below. On the following afternoon, also, he noticed that the man was observing Cronin from his deck chair. His wife was with him. He was puzzled. He discovered from the steward that they were Mr. and Mrs. John S. from London. The next day, he felt that John was too shy to come to him. On the final evening at sea, Mrs. John persuaded her husband to come and talk Cronin as he passed along the deck. The man came to introduce himself and gave him his visiting card. The name in the visiting card did not mean anything to Cronin. Then, with great difficulty, he told him that he and his wife would like to talk to him. He went sat near them. He told me that this was their first visit to America. It was not an entirely holiday trip. They had been making a tour of New England states, inspecting many of the summer recreational camps for young people there. They also visited settlement houses in New York and other cities. Wanted to study the methods used in dealing with backward, maladjusted, and delinquent youth. There was much enthusiasm in his voice and manner. Cronin liked him. He found out that he and his wife had been active in youth welfare for the last 15 years. He was a lawyer by profession. In addition to his work in the court, he was the director of a charitable organization devoted to the welfare of girls and boys. These boys and girls were mostly lawbreakers from city slums. He learned about their work. They took adolescents in bad condition from the juvenile courts and placed them in a healthy environment. They healed them in mind and body and sent them back into the world. They were given training in some handicraft so that they could live as worthy citizens. He wanted to know why he did such a work. The question had a strange effect on him. He took a deep breath and asked Cronin if he still did not remember the man. Cronin replied no. Then John said that he had wanted to get in touch with Cronin for many years, but he was not able to do so. Then he whispered to him something that took him back to the incident that happened 25 years ago. He had then met him just once. So students, we heard the summary of the first 9 paragraphs from the text. Let's see some difficult words and its meanings. Promenade, a public place for walking. You can see the deck of the ship in the picture. Tedium means boredom. Importunate, asking for something many times in a way that is annoying. Diffidence means shyness. Recede means to stop growing. Sober means not too bright in color. Rimless means without frame, disposition, character, or behavior. You can see the picture of bugle here. Intrigue means interested to know about something or someone. Steward means caretaker. Awkwardness means shyness. Haltingly means stopping and starting often because of lack of confidence. Recreational means refreshing and entertaining. Maladjusted, having mental and emotional problems that led to unacceptable behavior. Delinquent means showing a tendency to commit crimes. Disarming means making people feel less angry. Solicitor means lawyer. Derelict means in a bad condition. Redemption, a state of being saved from the power of evil. Now it's time for reading. On the second day out from New York, while making the round of the promenade deck, I suddenly became aware that one of the passengers was watching me closely, following me with his gaze every time I passed. I wanted to rest to avoid the tedium of casual and importunate shipboard contacts. I gave no sign of having noticed the man. Yet, there was nothing importunate about him. On the contrary, he seemed affected by a troubled, rather touching diffidence. He was in his early 40s, rather short in build, with a fair complexion and clear blue eyes. His thin hair had begun to recede from his forehead. His dark suit, sober tie, and rimless spectacles gave evidence of a serious and reserved disposition. At this point, the bugle sounded for dinner, and I went below. On the following forenoon, I again observed my fellow voyager watching me earnestly from his deck chair. Now, a lady was with him, obviously his wife. The situation by this time had begun to intrigue me. I discovered my steward that they were Mr. and Mrs. Jonas from a small suburb of London. When another day passed without event, I began to feel certain that Mr. S would remain too shy to carry out his obvious desire to approach me. However, on our final evening at sea, Mrs. S decided the matter. With a firm pressure on his hand and a whispered word in his ear, she urged her husband towards me as I passed along the deck. "Excuse me, doctor, I wonder if I might introduce myself." He spoke almost breathlessly, offering me the visiting card he held in his hand and studying my face to see if the name meant anything to me. Then, as it plainly did not, he went on with the same awkwardness. "If you could spare a few minutes, my wife and I would like to have a word with you." A moment later, I was occupying the vacant chair beside them. Haltingly, he told me that his had been their first visit to America. It was not entirely a holiday trip. They had been making a tour of the New England states, inspecting many of the summer recreational camps for young people there. Afterwards, they had visited settlement houses in New York and other cities to study the methods employed in dealing with cases of backward, maladjusted, and delinquent youth. There was in his voice and manner, indeed in his whole personality, a genuine enthusiasm that was disarming. I found myself liking him instinctively. Questioning him further, I learned that he and his wife had been active for the past 15 years in the field of youth welfare. He was by profession a solicitor, but in addition to his practice at the courts, found time to act as director of charitable organization devoted to care of boys and girls, mostly from city slums, who had fallen under the ban of the law. As he spoke with real feeling, I got a vivid picture of the work these people were doing. Learned how they looked derelict adolescents from the juvenile courts and placing them in a healthy environment, healed them in mind and body, and sent them back into the world. They were given training in a useful handicraft which made them fit to take their place as worthy members of the community. It was a work of redemption that stirred the heart, and I asked what had directed his life into this channel. The question had a strange effect upon him. He took a sharp breath. and exclaimed, "You still do not remember me?" I shook my head. To the best of my belief, I had never in my life seen him before. "I wanted to get in touch with you for many years," he went on, under increasing stress, "but I was never able to bring myself to do so." Then, bending near, he spoke a few words tensely in my ear. At that, slowly the veils parted. My thoughts sped back a quarter of a century, and with a start, I remembered the sole occasion when I had seen this man before. We'll discuss the rest of the story in the next class. Read the textbook thoroughly. If you have any doubts, ask me. Thank you.